Okay, welcome everybody. This is Kristen Prupps with the Chamber of Commerce. Thank you all for joining us. We may have a couple more people trickling in as we get going, but I want to make sure that we make the best use of everybody's time. So with no further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Norma Lansing, President and CEO of the Effingham County Chamber of Commerce.
This is the Chamber's very first ever webinar. So hopefully, I think it'll go well. We've got great presenters for you today, and looking forward to being able to answer your questions. You know, as we've watched events unfold the last couple of weeks, our main concerns have been being able to share information from trusted resources for our business so that they have accurate information and true information, and also just to provide support to our members through this challenging time. We've just a couple of things to tell you. We've added a special COVID-19 resource page on our website at effinghamcountychamber.com, and we're updating that several times a week. In fact, it's being updated right now, so please refer to it for assistance. You'll find a link to it right from our homepage. And while you're on the website, we encourage you to check the business directory for our local businesses who can help you. Today, I recommend that you check out the business banking and finance link for local financial institutions who are ready to help you with some of the programs we're going to be discussing. Thanks to our federal and state government, they're putting together a lot of different programs, grant and loan programs for us, and it's really hard to keep track of them all. So we wanted to provide some clarity about a couple of programs today, and so we thank Jay Beenekemper, who's a commercial lender, and Zana Tucker-Lau, who's the Effingham QD president for First Mid Bank and Trust, along with Ryan Gleason, who is the manager of the Great Lakes Region Office of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. We're going to spend about 10 to 15 minutes on the Paycheck Protection Program, and then about 30 minutes with Ryan on the other grant and loan programs that are available. The chat box is open, so please feel free to ask questions as we go along. We'll pause a couple of times to respond to anything that hasn't been addressed during the presentation. We are recording the presentation, and we'll have that available for you probably Friday. If we don't get your question answered during the webinar, we'll respond to it later. So let's get started with Jay. You're ready to go.
Thanks to Kristen and Norma and the Chamber for putting this all together. As we kind of sat down and looked at what we wanted to look at presenting today, we decided to go ahead and talk about the CARE Act. That kind of seems like the hottest topic. We've been getting phone calls for a week and a half now about this. The SBA's put out a bunch of programs in the last week and a half, 2 weeks to kind of deal with this, but this kind of seems like the hot button item. So we're just kind of going to go high level on this. I'm not going to get down in the weeds too much because there's a ton of questions, you know, once each individual business gets into their specific situation. So we'll just go from there. Basically, for just a little shameless plug here for First Mid, we've been doing SBA lending for over 30 years now. For the past 6 years, we've been SBA Lender of the Year in Illinois. So we feel like we got a pretty good handle and a good relationship with the SBA to help our customers and people in the community kind of push their way through these programs. As you can see there's several of these programs. We're just going to focus on the CARE Act, or the PPP loan program as they're calling it. So basically what this program does, the Paycheck Protection Program, really the goal of this program is to, 1, keep people working, or 2, bring people back to work. And it's 100% loan guaranteed by the federal government, and it all came out after the last stimulus package was passed. So there's $350 billion allocated to help small businesses through this. When we go to the next slide here, we can kind of see the eligibility requirements. Now, there's not too many businesses in our market that are going to be outside of this, small businesses with fewer than 500 employees. So, you know, we don't have a lot of that here in Effingham that's going to be affected by that necessarily. It does cover sole proprietors, independent contractors, and people that are self-employed. A lot of that is going to come into play here in a couple weeks. There's 2 rollout dates, one that's hopefully coming out shortly for businesses, and then a week or so later, I believe it's going to come out for these other guys. So I guess, what are we looking for? I guess any business that was in operation before February 15th of 2020 is going to qualify for this program. As we look to see how we're going to figure out what the loan proceeds are, basically the program is based off 2.5 times your average monthly payroll cost incurred in the prior year. So basically, we're going to look at 2019 payroll. We're going to do an average for the month, and then we're going to multiply that by 2.5 times. So that's how we get to the amount of the loan that we potentially qualify for. So with that, the key part that everybody's interested in this program is that portion of the loan is potentially forgivable. So that's why everybody's after this program. So with that, once you receive the funds, you can use 75% of those funds. They have to go to payroll. If, you know, if you're looking for the forgiveness portion of it. And then the other 25% can be used for things like rent, utilities, and more or less other operating costs. So that's kind of what we can use the money for, how we can use it, and basically we're going to have, after the loan is initiated, there'll be a 8-week period after the loan is in place that they're going to look at for the loan forgiveness. So after 8 weeks, you can apply for your loan forgiveness. So we want to make sure that we're using those funds correctly so that 8 weeks from now, you know, you get that money forgiven. So this is payroll cost. You know, we're going to be looking at salary, wage, commission, payment of cash tips or equivalents. So if we kind of look through here, we can see what most of that is. Like I said, I'm not going to get down into the weeds of all about this. We're just kind of putting an awareness out there as to what the program is and what it offers. So as you can see, you know, it's going to cover rent as a portion, utility payments, and interest on your mortgage obligations. Those could all qualify for forgiveness. I think that mainly hits most of the key parts of the program. Like I said, the biggest thing to remember is the goal is to keep people working or to bring people back to work. So some of the people that are kind of in a pickle when it looks specifically at the CARE Act are the people that have already been closed, like our bars and restaurants. They're probably going to have to look for, you know, look at one of the other SBA programs to help those folks out. But the ones that are still operating, this is, you know, going to help them to keep that payroll going, keep people working, and if possible, even bring people back to keep people employed. So And I guess with that, I can turn it over to questions if you guys have some.
If anybody has a question, just please unmute yourself and say your name, and then Jay will be able to take your question.
I have a question for seasonal businesses. Whenever you figure that 2.5, how would you figure that for a seasonal business?
Correct. We're still waiting on a bunch of guidance from the SBA. It hasn't actually technically been rolled out, so we don't even we can't even actually apply for this yet. We're hoping potentially first part of next week. Some people are saying maybe tomorrow, but the SBA hasn't rolled that all out yet. There is some guidance out there about seasonal employees. See if it's in this one. Okay, for seasonal employers, can you see that on your screen there?
Yes.
So for the 12-week period beginning.
Okay, our business is not open an hour of that or a month of that time frame.
So, yeah.
So it's either annual. Sorry, go
I would
ahead.
assume annual, or it would make sense to me that we would try to match that this time period with last year.
Okay, thanks.
I have a question.
Sure.
Are the funds available by first come, first serve with the applications? I mean, do we need to rush to get our applications in?
Yeah, I do believe that's going to be the case. Like I said, there's $350 billion allocated. But with that, I also believe that, you know, we can already tell there's a big push for people to get these applications in as soon as they can.
But the website's not going to be up tomorrow?
Correct. So basically what First Mid is doing is we are, you know, taking information that we can, you know, if you're not a First Mid customer now, you know, we're trying to streamline the process for everybody, but we're taking in, you know, 2019 taxes, or if those aren't done, a 2019 P&L, a current debt schedule, and then from there, you know, we run it through our parameters to approve it so that we can, you know, once we're able to take the SBA application, that we'll be in a position to submit that. Does that answer your question? Hello? I can hear
Hello?
somebody trying to.
Yeah, I'm trying to get it up on video.
Okay.
Is it video or just audio?
It's just audio.
Okay. Sorry, I'm joining late, so.
No problem.
Are there more questions?
Any other questions?
Today?
I have another question. Can you include commissions that you pay to independent distributors?
There is, I mean, I see here that, you know, there's individuals who operate as an independent contractor. I don't know if it's probably not, because that's probably a, you know, this is really looking at payroll. So I don't know, I could check on that for sure, but, you know, that may be,
Since they are not a W-2 employee, it's probably not included in the payroll costs.
not from the guidance that I've seen. Now, once we get all the information from the SBA, maybe that'll be included in there. But, you know, right now it's kind of, basic high-level information coming from them as well.
Okay.
Can you help us streamline how we go through our bank and they submit this? Or do we go
Correct.
online and submit it ourselves?
Correct. For this program specifically for the CARE Act, it does go through your bank, as long as they're they're participating in the SBA programs, they'll be able to help you do this. And basically, you'll submit the application once the SBA provides us the application. We would give it to you. You would fill out the application, return it to us, and then we would do all the back-end work submitting it to the SBA.
Should we apply at more than one bank?
I don't think there's a need for that. Because basically every bank is going to be putting the same information into the SBA system.
What other information do we need to provide besides the application?
So we're still waiting on guidance for sure. Kind of what we've heard, we've got the application here. Probably they're going to be looking at your 941s and potentially a 940 to show what wages that you paid in the prior year.
Okay. And what's the name of the specific act? I'm sorry, I came in late.
Yep, it is called the Payment Protection Program. It's called CARES, and it's also known as the Payment Protection Program. So that's the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act.
CARES, okay. Is there a start date and a late date? I guess how long do you have to apply?
Well, up until June 30th? June 30th. The start date hasn't come yet because we're not able to apply to the SBA yet. Could come as soon as tomorrow, more likely sometime next week.
Okay.
Jay, I'm going to pop in here real quick. We're going to kind of do this last question I got on chat. The question is, with the minimum wage increase in Illinois on January 1, 2020, can we use the new business period of January 1 to February 29 to calculate our monthly payroll averages?
I do believe you can.
And I think, Norma, are you unmuted? Did you want to bring in Ryan? Where's Norma? I think what we're going to try and do is, if you don't get your questions answered here in this forum, we want to, again, be respectful of everyone's time. Please email them to Norma Lansing, and that's nlansing@effinghamcountychamber.com, and we'll be sure that we get those answered after the fact. Jay, I also had a request. Will you be providing the slide deck to people that have attended here after the meeting?
Yes, we can do that. I believe I've shared that with Norma already. It may actually be on the chamber website. I'm not certain, but there's a link. If you go to firstmid.com, you can also listen to an entire webinar that we did for customers a few days ago that covers all the current programs.
Awesome. Okay, well, I think, Norma, are you there? Oh, okay, go ahead.
So if our business was shut down and our employees had to go home and they're not able to work, we could still technically pay them their wages that they would have got. Is this what this is saying? Even though they're not coming to work, we can just keep paying them what they would have normally got, and then we can get that forgiven?
That is a gray area that I'm trying to figure out. I had a customer ask me that today as well. Had some guidance from that customer accountant that that's possible, but I don't know that for certain.
Hi, Jay.
I
This
do
is
know that. Go
This is
ahead.
Ryan Gleason. I've covered the PPP pretty thoroughly. So not to jump in, but that is the purpose of this plan, ma'am. If you are able to receive money to pay people, let's say, for example, the governor, shut down your business, but you have someone at home that's able to be paid, that's the purpose of it. So yes, in the short answer.
Great. Thank you.
Norma, are you there?
Hopefully. Can you hear me?
She is. Yep,
I
we
had
can hear you now.
volume
Okay.
turned down, that's why. So thanks, Jay, and continue to ask questions either in the chat box or emailing me. We're going to turn it over to Ryan Gleason from the U.S. Chamber, and we really appreciate Ryan taking the time to join us. I'm sure he's been on many of these webinars the last couple of days. I've been on 3 a day myself, trying to learn all about this. So Ryan will be able to fill in the blanks on the Paycheck Protection Program, as well as the other grants and loans that are out there being offered. So Ryan, thanks for joining us.
Great. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yep.
Good.
Good.
Well, first, thank you, Norma and Kristen, for having me. My name is Ryan Gleason. I'm with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Congressional and Public Affairs office in Chicago, covering Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Kentucky. Jay, good job presenting on 3P plan. I wish I was speaking with all of you under better terms. So let me assure you that there is help out there and that more help is on the way. So first I want to start off with the Federal CARES Act, which passed last Friday, and kind of give you the lay of the land. So the CARES Act is a $2 trillion package. It is just under 10% of our regular GDP in our country. This package is designed to be robust because that's the idea, to help bridge us to avoid a prolonged recession and downturn, and allows us to return regular commerce when we can begin to resume back to normal commerce. In addition to the $2 trillion in face value of the package, some of the funds can be used by the Federal Reserve and can be leveraged to provide an additional $4 trillion in support for the economy. We'll talk a little about individual provisions, perhaps the most important automatic payments that the federal government is making to individual taxpayers. They will begin the process of direct depositing these funds to taxpayers across the country. The amount is $1,200 per individual, $2,400 for joint returns, plus $500 per child. And it begins to phase out for incomes above $75,000 or for joint incomes of $150,000. Unfortunately, as some of you may already know, last week 6.6 million Americans filed for unemployment or unemployment claims. The week before that was 3.3 million. So as much as we support business, we're going to have to rise in unemployment almost irrespective. So that comes with some fairly robust expansion of unemployment benefits. Most importantly, most restrictions on eligibility for unemployment. Remember, if you go through unemployment applying for assistance, there are these qualifications about how long you've been employed, how long you have to wait, etc. Those eligibility requirements have been amended as it's related to the coronavirus. So in addition, the federal government is providing an additional $600 on top of the regular state benefits through July 31st. States simply have to agree to agree to accept this additional benefit for their residents. I believe that Illinois has. A lot of questions have come up about whether or not individuals will remain on unemployment, particularly if given the advanced benefit. So it's important to remember that when eligibility ends, when an individual can return to work. So if an employer is reopening and calling for employees back and that employee is available to work and they choose not to work, then their individual eligibility ends. How do you access this? So you still go through your state unemployment office. You don't go to the federal government. You go to your state employment office here in the state of Illinois. So I wanted to go over some major provisions for all employers. We really broken them down into three groups. The provisions that are available to all employers, the provisions that will be available to larger employers and small business, self-employed, independent contractors, nonprofits, is where we'll spend the bulk of our time today, including the time that Jay had provided. So the major provisions for employers, the first is the payroll tax provision for employers who pay payroll taxes. So think about this, everyone who's writing a check to their employees, after you write that check, you normally write another check to the federal government covering the payroll taxes for both the employee and the employer side. Under this bill, an employer may choose to delay their payment of the portion of payroll taxes, which is 6.2% of Social Security wages, and they can delay paying that between now and January 1st of 2021. If they choose that, they have to pay 50% of the accumulated amounts that would have been owed by December 31st, 2021, and the remaining by December 31st, 2022. There's an important caveat here, though. This generally is available to all employers, except if you had a loan forgiven under the Paycheck Protection Program, as Jay alluded to. This is a small business program, which was discussed earlier by Jay. So some other tax changes that are important, net operating losses or NOLs. If you have a business who had an operating loss and you want to be able to use that against prior taxes paid, now operating losses are extended from 2018, 2019, and 2020 and can generally be carried back 5 years. This also applies to pass-throughs and sole proprietors. If you're a business, this is primarily for corporations that have AMT credits, and you can accelerate the recovery through those. Sorry about that. I didn't go to the next slide. So coming off the AMT credits, then additionally, on top of that, you'll have the opportunity to increase your interest deductibility for 2019 and 2020. And importantly, for restaurants and retail establishments who in the past couple of years may have made investments in their property, they can accelerate the recovery of that. All these provisions are really centered around one idea, improving liquidity for employers. At the moment, when employers have no revenue coming in, it's really hard to pay the bills. So all these provisions give employers greater access to liquidity. So it's not so much about really reducing overall taxes as it is timing. Giving employers more access to the cash they have today to be able to pay their employees, I sort of alluded to when you chimed in. So this is available to all employers. This is the Employee Retention Credit. Now, this was a late addition to the bill, and the bill is the CARES Act. The earlier draft of the CARES Act did not include this provision. So as a result, there hasn't been a lot of attention paid to it. The retention credit generally applies to employers. We're talking about businesses, but also nonprofits, for example, who are fully or partly shut down as a result of coronavirus, or who had a 50% drop in their gross receipts in a quarter and they're eligible for this until the gross receipts get back to 80% of their prior year's amount. So think about this. This is designed to help employers who've shut down or lost revenue, but who continue to pay employees. How much is the tax credit worth? It's worth 50% of wages paid up by the employer up to $10,000 per employee. Now that's a fully refundable tax credit. So think about it as about a $5,000 tax credit available to the employer. There's some special rules with more than 100 employees and employers with less than 100 employees. If you have more than 100 employees, the benefit only applies to employees who you are paying but are not providing services. So think about it this way. If your business is shut down, you've had a drop in revenue, your employee's not working, they're not teleworking, but you continue to pay them. You can access this credit as benefit in recognition of the fact that you paid them. Now, if you have less than 100 employees, the requirement that they may not be providing services does not apply. It is only available to employees who you paid during the eligible period. The eligible period is when you're shut down or when you have a quarter with this drop in gross receipts relative to the prior year. Again, here, the Paycheck Protection Program, one that Jay alluded to, if you receive one of those loans, it can be converted into a grant. You cannot take advantage of the employee retention credit that we're talking about right here. We understand that employers may have cash flow problems. And one of the things for employers who take advantage of this, we expect Treasury will be providing guidance that will allow employers to get an advance of payment on the credit, which will help pay employees today. All right, so let's begin to talk about mid-size and larger employers. In the bill, in total, $500 billion to the Treasury Department to support loans, loan guarantees, and Federal Reserve credit facilities. The Federal Reserve credit facilities, you may have read about them in the paper. These are the things that the Federal Reserve is creating, for example, to support commercial paper, money market funds. They do these as a regular course of business when we have a financial crisis. They were used robustly, for example, in 2008. 450 billion of that 500 is directly going to business at large. There are special programs for the airline industry and critical national security businesses that will make up the remainder. We do expect in the coming days the Federal Reserve to focus more guidance on these credit facilities and actually launch them with the terms and conditions. And we're likely to see those restrictions go along with this in exchange for accepting benefits that it could include stock buybacks by the company as long as their loan's pending for an additional year and limits on executive compensation. So that's really is the bulk of what this webinar is today about small businesses, self-employed, independent contractors, non-for-profits. The Paycheck Protection Program, as Jay had went through, I'm happy to field any lingering questions that you may have on that after we're done here. But if not, I'd like to give you a moment to at least read the slide, and then we can kind of continue further. In order to learn more about the Paycheck Protection Program, this is something you'll certainly want to write down. Download our guide by simply visiting www.uschamber.com/sbloans. If you go to that link or type that link in, a 4-page, very easy to read guide comes forth about how you go about going through with this loan. I mean, so we prepared a 4-step guide to prepare you for applying one of these loans. It goes into detail who is eligible for the Paycheck Protection Program, but how you calculate your average monthly payroll cost. I know that's going to be a question. What your lender might be looking for when you show up to apply for a loan, and how your forgiveness can be calculated. And one of the things that we're doing at the U.S. Chamber is encouraging small businesses to really understand whether they're eligible for this program and think about what loan forgiveness might look like in your situation back end as you make a decision of whether or not to apply for one of these grants or loans, such as the credit retention in the Paycheck Protection Program. So next is kind of the other thing that's getting a lot of attention right now that affects small businesses, the self-employed, independent contractors, and nonprofit. And that's the SBA Economic Injury Disaster Loans, known as EIDL loans, EIDL loans. EIDL loans have been around for a long time. If you might have been affected by a hurricane, a tornado, a flood, any sort of natural disaster, you might have applied for an EIDL loan. So who's eligible for these EIDL loans? There's small businesses and nonprofits, including faith-based. There are no restrictions here on the types of nonprofit. It's any entity that has fewer than 500 employees. And again, here, sole proprietors and independent contractors. So the difference between the EIDL loans and the PPP loan, or the PPP program rather, is that this is actually a loan. It does not convert into a grant. You can borrow up to $2 million in working capital that's repaid over 30 years over the interest rates that you can see there on the screen. If you take out this loan, payments are deferred up to a year, so you don't have to immediately start paying them back on this loan. Excuse me. They made it easier for individual businesses to apply. Your loan is going to be based on your credit scores. You do not have to immediately produce tax returns. You can get up to $200,000 without a personal guarantee, and there's no collateral required for $25,000 or less. Beyond that, there's a general security interest, or sometimes it's secured with real estate, but they're trying to move away from that in this particular instance. It's an important feature that it's an important feature of the brand new Results of the CARES Act. If you're applying for an EIDL loan, one of these injury disaster loans, you can be provided an emergency grant, which they have to provide you within 3 days of up to $10,000. The CARES Act details what you may use for the grant, but there is no requirement. The $10,000 grant does not have to be repaid, even if you are denied the EIDL loan. So when you apply for the loan, you request the emergency grant, you receive it, and let's say you're denied the loan, you still do not have to pay back the $10,000. You should essentially think of this as an emergency grant for small business. There's some other important interactions with the Paycheck Protection Program that was spoken about earlier that was talked about. Importantly, if you end up with both, generally you would end up with both because you've already gotten an EIDL loan since they've been out there for a while now. But maybe now the Paycheck Protection laws are being set up for those applying. You can roll them together, but you can't get double forgiveness for the $10,000 grant. That would come off the Paycheck Protection Program's forgiveness. There's also some requirements with respect to the Paycheck Protection loans that you can't double dip. So if you take out the two loans, you can't take out the two loans to pay the same bill. So if you're thinking about both of these, you may want to think about those restrictions. And again, for the paycheck, it was payroll, mortgages on business, rent on business, utility on business. So what they've done is make the Paycheck Protection most favorable and tacked on other programs that do not avail themselves to the Paycheck Protection loan. And that includes this EDL loan that we're currently looking at. You don't apply for this by going to your local bank. Unlike the PPP, you apply this on the Small Business Administration website. And that is at sba.gov. This is where chambers and other 501c6s, which might not be relevant to you all on the call, apply for. Chambers can also receive employee retention credit if they've been substantially shut down. So next, we're going to talk about the paid sick leave. Um, uh, there were a couple of things here. So as it relates to paid sick leave, which was in phase two of the bill phase two bill that passed a couple of weeks ago, known as the Family First Act. Excuse me. 500 employees. It was a requirement that employers with less than 500 employees provide paid sick leave of 10 days paid sick leave to their employees if it relates to the coronavirus. Sick leave is taken when you're ill, when you're quarantined, when you need to take a family member who's quarantined, or taking care of a child because of school or daycare closures. Obviously, a lot has changed since then, which we'll get into. The leave is paid at your regular rate, but it's maximum of $511 a day. Unless you're taking care of a family member, then it's 2/3 the regular rate, with a maximum of $200 per day. Importantly, the federal government will reimburse the employer 100% of these costs to the maximum daily of $500, $511 you can pay your employees. This is refundable tax credit. And understanding that businesses often have liquidity problems as well, the Treasury is taking steps. The Treasury is allowing businesses to request an advance of these refundable credits so that you have the resources to pay employees who are taking sick leave. This is in addition to what the employer already provides, including what you provide pursuant to state and local law. Mind you that paid sick leave and family leave is this is just the federal government giving you a little bit more backbone. Then let's talk about the businesses with less than 50 employees being exempt. The law does provide that an employer may exempt, but they can not only exempt with respect to the leave that's caring for a child whose daycare closed, only to the extent if providing the leave threatens the viability of the business. If you think that applies to you, you should check out the Department of Labor's guidelines that they're posting on their website, where they explain this further. And finally, paid sick leave is generally not available for an employee when they can telework. This only applies for an employee is taken care of, for example, a child, and they can also telework, for example, by staggering or changing their hours. Okay, getting close here. Paid family leave, or known as FMLA, for those not familiar, it's the Family Medical Leave Act. It's a law that generally allows 12 weeks of unpaid leave. What phase two bill did for employers with less than 500 employees, they're required to provide 10 weeks of paid family leave if the employee needs to take care of a child due to school closure, childcare closure caused by coronavirus. That's the only reason for extended leave. When you think about the interaction between this and sick leave, an employee would take 10 days of sick leave first and then would be eligible for 10 weeks of paid leave, as we're seeing closures across the states, including here in the state of Illinois. Here, leave is paid at 2/3 the regular rate. Again, maximum amount of $200 per day, $10,000 in the aggregate. It is in addition to what you already provide under state and local law. Again, it's fully reimbursed the same way by the federal government. There are similar ways that for employers with fewer than 50 employees, same as paid sick leave, and it doesn't apply to an employee, again, who can telework. So in order to get more information, the Chamber has been on this. We have not focused on any sort of other issue. This is what is driving us day after day. So you can visit us at www.uschamber.com. In particular, we have great small business resources at www.chamber.com/co. And then our PPP guide, again, is www.chamber.com/SBLoans. So with that, I'll turn it back.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Ryan. Does anybody have any questions that they'd like put in front of Ryan?
I saw a couple that were in the chat box as well. I haven't had an opportunity to look at them. Oh, I see. Okay. Doug, if you're still on the line, again, that website was the last one. It's uschamber.com/SB loans. Well, if there are no questions, I would love to provide Norma with my PowerPoint so that hopefully she could provide it to those on the call today. And then in addition to that, we have a one-page briefer that is clear and cut about the employee retention tax credit. We have a one-pager on the economic injury disaster loans. And then again, that four-pager about the payment protection, paycheck protection program. I've said that about 1,000 times today. And I will send those over to her that hopefully she can distribute to you. They're really helpful tools in helping you decide what you want to go with and how you want to go about doing it.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Ryan. Norma, are you on the line still?
I am. Ryan, one question that was asked of me was how will decision be made on who gets the funding since there's a finite amount to be given out? Is it basically first come, first served?
I'm sorry, repeat that.
So how will decisions be made on who gets funded with these various programs? I know that, since there's a finite amount of money and there's a lot of businesses looking for assistance, is the funding just going to be distributed on a first come, first served? So, or is there some kind of another?
The plan of action that most on the call today that are small business folks, owners, you all should call your local lender or bank and make sure that they're participating in this program. This program is supposed to go live tomorrow. I'm not saying everyone should be out the door, but it's suggested to apply earlier rather than later. Now, again, Congress is out until April 20th, of which they're intending to work on a phase 4 bill. They want to work on where they missed, where they maybe came up short. So if the money, hope to God, is short by then, we could refigure that. But it suggested you do this earlier rather than later. But I don't want to panic people in suggesting to get to their banks tomorrow, Friday. The money will be there for weeks. Just do not wait until, especially for the PPP program. The PPP program ends June 30th. So certainly do not wait until June 30th to obviously apply for this program. The EIDL loan program runs through December 31st. So there is no massive rush on that as well, especially if you do potentially want to go with that. I'm reading here now. We have a question here, and I'm going to try and answer these the best that I can. I will admit that I do not have all the answers, and if I don't, hopefully we'll be able to get them to me to answer you at a later. If I'm not able to answer your question, if you could email Norma your question, and I will try and be able to email you back and answer that for you. So we have a question here that says, so if we let people go on March 23rd and we had fewer than 500 employees, we are obligated to pay them for 10 days of sick leave and putting them on unemployment? That is a good question. If you are terminating them on March 23rd, they would be put on unemployment because they're no longer associated. Their relationship was terminated with your company. Let's see, another question here. If we seek the PPP loan, how long do we have to assure that we maintain our current employees? If the economy does not bounce back quickly, is there a point in time we can opt for laying off employees while still having the loan forgiveness? That is a good question. Let me see here. This has been kind of one of the trickiest to do. Is no matter what, if you bring back an employee, you'll have to keep them on until June 30th, regardless of how the economy is. I mean, granted, it could take, turn for the worse, God forbid. But it is required at this point that you keep them until June 30th. But if an employee, let me see here, I'm sorry here. Really quick change. So kind of on a broader scale, and this goes back to a couple of dates because so employers can also avoid a reduction in their forgiveness. Obviously, a lot of people, if they've had to lay people off, if they bring their employees back and restore their wages by June 30th of this year. So like a way to think about this, if you laid off an employee or reduced the wages or hours to help you get through this period of time, if those reductions in either wages or in dismissal happen between the 15th of February and April 26th of this year, you'll need to restore those employees and or bring them back to the previous wages by June 30th in order for the loan to be forgiven as a grant. Additionally, after April 26th, you can't make any number of the changes of employees or wages until after June 30th to be forgiven. So essentially, you have until April 26th to bring employees back. Now, not to have any confusion, if an employee was laid off or reduced hours prior to February 15th of this year, you do not have to restore them to qualify for forgiveness for PPP. I think I can answer the next one. How does PPP and unemployment work together? Can an employee file if the company has PPP? An employee may file prior to the company having PPP, but once the company has PPP and that company is able to work and they're asking that employee to come back and they don't want to, they're no longer eligible for unemployment insurance. Another question is the 10K emergency grant part of the EIDL loan or can be separate? That I would have to double check. I believe it can be separate. This recently came up because this was the part that was added on Friday. The EIDL loans have been up, but apparently there's a different section for it on the 10K. I don't want to say for sure yes, but I believe that is the case. Ryan, how long does it take to get the funds once applied for the PPP program? Well, I wish I had a crystal ball, but according to the Treasury Secretary, once this is up and fully running, and this could come as soon as this week or next week, you could imagine yourself, especially if you don't have a crowded bank or lender or what have you, you could go to that bank or lender or in the morning, and then in the evening have that loan in hand. That is what has been relayed to us, and I believe that will ultimately be the case. So that's a good question. And if you keep them until June 30th or even later, if you have approved from the PPP program and can the employees work from home if the government? Yes. So they can continue working from home. Telecommute is advised, but the program would end June 30th. If you're able to keep the employee on, that's great. But June 30th is kind of the deadline there. Let's see here. A lot of these are the turnaround for the PPP. I mean, it's not going to be more than a couple of days, and when it's at full peak and running, we should be seeing within 24 hours. A lot of questions on 30th. Sorry, I'm just going through the chat here. So we have an individual saying that they laid off 11 people and want to bring them back after the lockdown. Do I have to bring them back by April 26th? Or can I wait until the governor says the lockdown is over and bring them May 4th? Good question. So again, the purpose of the PPP program is for you to get money in the form of loans that can be converted into grants, and that can be per payroll. So in that case, you may have to pay your employees perhaps at a 75% reduced salary, or excuse me, a 25% reduced. And hypothetically, they would be working from home if they could, and if they couldn't, you would still be just paying those employees' salaries, because the purpose of this program is to incentivize, is to give money to business to incentivize them to then pay their employees. And then eventually, when the shutdown ends on May 4th, they would be able-bodied to return to your physical business location. That brings us to about 4:30, and there's no more questions. Hopefully I got to answer everyone's. And then if you have any further lingering questions, please feel free to reach out to Norma, and then she can reach out to me, and I will try my best to get back to you.
Okay, everybody. Thank you so much, Ryan and Jay, and Zaina's back there somewhere, I'm sure. We really appreciate the information that you've shared and the questions that have been asked, reminding everybody that the webinar has been recorded, and we'll have that available to you probably tomorrow. I would guess Kristen may have a different number, but I'm thinking tomorrow. Just want to let you know, remind you that you can go to our website. We have a special COVID-19 section that's right there at the top of the homepage for you to get a lot of the resources that Ryan and Jay referred to are already out there. We'll make sure and get them out there if they're not. We are planning additional webinars. We're setting up one for next week with Todd Hull and Sasha Altoff from the city about the downstate small business stabilization program, which is has to run through a local unit of government. So you'll be able to log into that one next week and hear more about that program. If you have other topics for webinars that you would like for us to think about, be sure and let me know what those are, because I know another big area that I'm getting calls on is the whole unemployment issue. I know that's been touched on a little bit today, but we'll see if we can't find somebody who can answer your questions more thoroughly about the whole issue of unemployment. Before the webinar ends, I really want to give a special shout out and thank you to our medical community locally and across the country who are working very hard to keep us safe. I wouldn't be remiss if I didn't remind you to practice social distancing and urge you to show support for our local businesses and for each other. So very much, again, appreciate you joining us today, and I wish you Godspeed. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks.
Thank you so much.